I'm familiar with a few folks. I think about a half dozen or so have claimed that they've been off it. And the question is, were they misdiagnosed? Are they really off? I mean, are their beta cells recovering? Are they producing more? There's more C-peptide, all those types of things. We know that even long-term type 1 diabetics still produce a small residual amount of insulin. So it's not as though there's zero. But let's talk about it a little bit, because there's some people that may not know the difference. Type 1, type 2 diabetes. There's more types, just so people don't know. There's several subtypes and different types of that. But in general, type 2 diabetes, usually it's associated with obesity. Usually it's later in life. It used to be called adult onset diabetes. Usually we see people that are overweight and they become insulin resistant. And then basically they can't produce enough insulin to overcome the insulin resistance. And whereas type 1 diabetes, you have kind of primary failure of the insulin secreting beta cells, where they no longer have the full capacity to secrete insulin. Some people assume that they're dead, but I think the real accurate thing, what happens is they become de-differentiated. So they go back to a sort of a nondescript cell. They kind of turn back into almost like a stem cell, if you will, or pluripotent, undifferentiated cell. And so the question, some people say, well, is it possible to coax them back into becoming beta cells again? And that's there's some people doing research on that, but I don't know how promising that is. But you talk about, when you say healing, I mean, I assume when you say healing, it's you're like, I'm going to fix my type 1 diabetes so that I no longer require insulin. Is that what you mean by healing?
Yeah, that's the idea. Yes.
Well, I mean, like I said, if you can do that, that would be groundbreaking, and I know, like I said, I'm aware of a few people that have made the claims that, hey, I don't use insulin anymore. And that's, fascinating. And I just, I kind of want, like anything, there are probably multiple reasons for type 1 diabetes. There's probably multiple different little subtypes that are going on, and maybe some might be amenable to this at some point. Who knows? I mean, it could be. I mean, certainly we see during the honeymoon period. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of the Paleomedicine group. They said they claimed, and there's a French group that's also done that. They've duplicated people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and then not needing insulin for prolonged periods of time by doing this or some version of the diet. You'd mentioned, keto, you're very high fat. On carnivore, are you real high fat, or where are you doing with that? How does your protein and fat come into play? Do you know?
Right now, I am playing with eating a stick of butter a day, just to see what the health benefits might be. But I'll always eat high fat. If I'm not doing the butter every day, I'm doing beef fat trimmings and bacon. So I always try to get a lot of fat, because I think it helps the blood sugar to not go up as fast. I believe there's benefits in being in ketosis. So, yeah.
Yeah, when you eat a stick of butter, that's a lot of calories. I mean, some people will say, well, it's just a good way to get fat. If you eat a bunch of calories, big stick of butter.
I'm kind of seeing that. I have gained a few pounds. So the jury is still out on that one.
Yeah, I mean, like critics, a stick of butter is about 800 calories. I mean, I just looked it up real quick. And so it's like, if I'm eating 800 extra, well, I don't know if it's extra calories a day, if it's displacing some. Now, 800 calories in a day is not a big deal if that's all you're eating, but, if it goes from 2,000 calories to 2,800 calories, and then it's above and beyond what your needs are, you could, if you gain body fat, then potentially become more insulin resistant, and then you just kind of chasing your tail. And so it's one of those things where we know that, fat in the meal will mitigate a rise. So if you combine fat with carbs, depending on how much is in there, you may see less of a quick rise because the fat slows down the absorption. But at the end of the day, some people say, well, you may see a smaller rise, but it's a longer rise. And then the area under the curve is the same. And is that causing damage as well? Hard to say. I mean, maybe some people say it's easy to say. I look at body composition being a relatively important marker for what's going on. So if you're eating a stick of butter a day and you gain a bunch of body fat, I would say maybe not the best idea, but you have to see what's
right. I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks, and I'm not sure I'm going to keep it up, because I have gained some fat in the wrong place. Yeah. So, you know, and my blood sugars have been not as good.
Yeah. Well, so you might have the answer.
Yeah, I know. So your theory is pretty much right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, right.
Yeah. I mean,
I had just heard a podcast with Ivor Cummins talking about having low insulin. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation for me is that as a diabetic, I want to keep my insulin as low as possible. So even if I'm not going to heal myself, still is the point of keeping my insulin low, because I think that is more healthy than not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. There's a study that came out looking at type 1 diabetics and looking at insulin usage and cancer rates. And they saw, you know, they categorize them in low, medium, and high insulin usage. And the folks in the high insulin usage had the highest rates of cancer. It significantly increased it. And low was considered was about, half a unit per kilogram. So if you weighed, you know, let's say you weigh 60 kilos or whatever, I'm not sure what you weigh, you know, that would be 30 units a day. Anything below 30 units a day would be considered low. And there's a point where, you know, it's like, you know, you can do a diet to where you need almost no insulin, you know, but then are you losing muscle? Are you, you know, that's the question, you know, because you need a certain amount to retain the muscle in the tissues. And so there's like, what is low? What is too low? And then of course there's obviously too high. And, you know how you can get high, just eat a bunch of sugar and your insulin requirements will go through the roof. And so it's kind of one of those things that, you know, it's always that, is there a good place to be? Is there a too low and a too high? And sometimes, you know, you'd like to say, I don't need insulin anymore because my pancreas is now making its own insulin and I'm cured of diabetes. That's the thing. But is going to eat a pure fat diet the answer? And I don't know. I don't know that it is.
No. And when I was on the Lion diet for 3 months, mm-hmm. Yes, my insulin requirements went way, way down, but I lost a lot of weight and probably wasn't very healthy.
What was your blood glucose like? Was it good then too?
Oh, my blood glucose was good, but I just had to keep lowering my insulin way down. But I also lost like 8 pounds, which I don't weigh that much anyway. Yeah. So, you know, I weigh 115.
Yeah, the question is, I mean, it's because if you're getting enough protein, you know, you'd assume you're maintaining your lean mass. And, you know, like if you're losing excess body fat, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same point, if you start losing a bunch of lean mass when you don't have much to begin with, that's a problem. So interesting to see. How much were you eating? I mean, maybe you just weren't eating enough food, perhaps.
I may not have been eating because I might not have been eating enough. I was eating 2 lamb chops for breakfast, 2 lamb chops for dinner, mm-hmm. and probably a burger or steak for lunch.
Okay.
I don't know the ounces exactly.
Yeah, I think a lamb chop's about 4 ounces typically or something like that. So you might have been eating.
You know, it's probably eating a pound or a pound and a half of meat a day, I think.
Well, that's probably enough adequate protein. Yeah, at 115 pounds, that's if you're getting 100 pound and a half of meat, then you're getting adequate protein, I would assume. Interesting. Do you find that you know, as far as you said, you have no interest in putting on a CGM? That's kind of, you know, because a lot of people find that's really helps them to manage things.
I do have an interest in it. I do think that I would become anxious about having something attached to my body. Mm-hmm. And the constant alarms might make me anxious. And because I'm 68, I now have Medicare. I wasn't really able to afford it before that. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on possibly getting one.
Yeah, I think you can silence the alarms. I think some of the only real alarm that you can't silence is a critical low. So if you drop below 50, it's not, I think legally they're not allowed to, you know, because like, you know, danger, Will Robinson, you're going to have a coma. So they're, you know, or something like that. And so obviously, you know, and do you have an endocrinologist that oversees you or anything like that?
No. no, I kind of winged it. I went to a naturopath for many years, and then he stopped practicing, and then I've just been on my own. And recently I started going to a nurse practitioner so I could get labs done, because I'm just curious.
Yeah.
But I've been doing home A1C tests and pretty much being my own doctor for a pretty long time.
It's kind of funny because, you're basically type 1 diabetic that, you've been doing it your own without the doctor, and you probably have a better outcome than a lot of people that go to the endocrinologist, to be honest. I mean, just as, and again, I'm not saying everybody does that, but it's probably, you've probably at 68 and still in good health, you're doing probably better than 90+% of type 1 diabetics that have been out there that have been managed with a traditional system. So good on you for being able to do that. That's pretty interesting. And, it's, like I said, you're the one that has to live with this. You're the one that has to decide, how much insulin do I want to give myself and that type of stuff. So it's a very unique situation because, you've got this medication that could kill you. I mean, you overdose and you're dead. Or you could be dead, I mean, and same time, if you underdose, because there's a lot of people that there's this concept of diabulimia, and, you just like underdose your insulin and let the blood glucose ride, and you lose weight. I can lose weight. I let my blood glucose hang out around 250, 300 for a couple of weeks, and I'll lose 20 pounds because I'm peeing it all out. I'm peeing all that energy out. I'm not able to take it in my body. And so it's an interesting type of thing. Now,